Welcome to Season 2 of Students of Mind, the podcast where we aim to normalize conversations about mental health. Last season, we connected you with experts in the field of mental health to provide an understanding of topics and illnesses that may not have been easily accessible. This season, we will continue our learning journey together by not only speaking to experts, but also by listening to the voices and stories of real people who are living, surviving, and even thriving, while also facing challenges with their mental health in their everyday life. This season, we want to hear your stories to get the full truth of what it's like to manage one's mental health and navigate living with mental illness. My name is Jayde, and today is the second part of a two-part series where I sit down with parents to talk about parenthood and its effect on and relationship with mental health. Today's discussion features two mothers that have both been featured on the show before, Mia Hemstand and Kathi Barber. In our discussion, we talk about the ways mental health has shown up in their lives during their upbringing, before mamahood, and once being a mom, how change affects self-care and parenting, and more. I hope by listening to the show, you're able to learn something new and gain some encouragement through hearing our experts and listening to the journeys of our guests. However, this show is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your mental health professional or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have about your condition. Never disregard professional advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on the Students of Mind podcast. Today's guests are Mia Hemstand and Kathi Barber. Mia Hemstand, who was previously on the show, is a trauma-informed self-care coach, speaker, wife, and mama of two. Mia is the founder of No Longer Last, a group coaching experience that focuses on teaching women how to prioritize themselves. She is also the founder of the No Longer Last Journey podcast, where she shares her story, advice, and inspiration, all related to making your health, happiness, and well-being a priority. Our second guest is Kathi Barber, who has also previously been on the show and just happens to be my mom. She's also a writer, speaker, and mental health advocate. Today, the three of us sit down and talk about the ways that mental health has shown up throughout their lives, how parenting shifted their relationship with their mental health, how periods of change affect both parenting and self-care, and the ways these two mamas take care of themselves through it all. Hello, welcome, Mom and Mia. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Of course. Before we get into the topic of today, I just kind of want to let my audience get to know you guys a bit. So can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and the work that you do? We can start with Mia.
Cool. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Mia Hemstand. I'm a mom of two little kids. I'm a trauma-informed self-care coach, and I'm also a podcast host like Jayde. I host the No Longer Last Journey podcast, which is all about empowering women to prioritize themselves in a world that wants us to be second all the time. So those are a few of the things that I do.
All right, great. Mom, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathi Barber. I am the mom of two adult children, one named Jayde, who is the host of Students of Mind. I'm also the author of The Black Woman's Guide to Breastfeeding and also Lactation Management Strategies for Working with African American Moms. For the past 20 years, I've been consulting and working for different nonprofits, providing leadership on fundraising as well as marketing and communications.
Great. So today we're going to talk about parenting and mental health and how it all relates. So I think to start off the conversation, I kind of want to go back to the beginning and talk about childhood. And my first question is, what was your relationship and experience with your mental health as you were growing up? I know that a lot of the times we tend to not have conversations about mental health until we're older. So I wonder, as you are where you are in life now, looking back, if you're able to identify the ways your mental health challenges showed up as you were growing up.
Go ahead and dive in. I love this question. I am having a lot of epiphanies recently about how my anxiety was present long, beginning of childhood. I thought, oh, when I was a kid, I didn't have anxiety. And it's like, no, I did. I had really bad anxiety. So I'm just really starting to make sense of my childhood. And in terms of what was my relationship to mental health? Could I talk about it and things like that? I mean, the answer is no, absolutely not. It was never a model to me. Vocabulary around mental health wasn't even a thing. So even if I wanted to talk about it, I had no idea how. So I don't even think I heard the word anxiety until I was almost in college, really. So yeah, that's kind of where I started out, just going through it, but not knowing how to talk about it.
That seems like a very common experience, just not having the language, and when you don't know what you don't know, it's you can't explore it. Mom, how about you?
So when I was growing up, it's interesting, Mia, that you brought up anxiety. There was basically only one discussion that I heard growing up, and it was about a family member that suffered from a nervous breakdown, which we now know it was, a severe anxiety attack. So that family member, I don't know, maybe every couple of years would have to go to a mental health ward. And, my family, all they would say is that she had a nervous breakdown, which didn't give you any information on what that really meant. So she experienced that probably most of my lifetime, and may have been admitted probably in the last 2 years for about 5 days. But my family and this relative never talked about, even to this day, why she was actually admitted at these various points, other than she had a nervous breakdown. So other than that, mental health, mental illness was never discussed. But, when I reflect on my childhood, I could not name my experiences as mental illness. But in my 20s, that's when I started to connect. The fact that I was so different from everyone else, some things like, severe anxiety about school starting, or when I had to be on the bus stop going back and forth to school. I was really paranoid and terrified. And the way I would do things like put chairs up against my bedroom door at night when I was growing up, because I was scared and anxious that someone would break in and hurt me and hurt the family. So now when I look back on those things, I can definitely see that was anxiety and definitely some periods of depression.
That's really interesting about the family member that even to this day is, having admissions, and it's still not really being talked about.
It's not, it's funny. We actually have had some cousins over, and we got on the topic of mental illness. And how it often happens with Black people is that, oh, you need to just pray, that illness is something from the devil, and you need to have more faith in God, and even talking about those things are considered like something that you can choose to get over, or you need to have more faith in God to manage it, which is completely ludicrous.
Right. That's exactly my experience as well. So, the religious thing, I grew up in a super Orthodox traditional Catholic family, and it's just like, if you're struggling with anything mentally or emotionally, it's a spiritual thing, it's a moral failing. You're not praying enough, you don't trust God enough, you're not close with him. And I remember when I was in high school, somebody who was in our small church community committed suicide. Then that's actually the terminology I was given, committed suicide. He, died by suicide. And that was the first time it kind of like mental illness hit the church community in my small town in Guam, where I was raised. And even that wasn't really discussed. It was like the explanation came out that this person had bipolar disorder. And as far as I understand, you're just like born with that, and there's like nothing you can do. And that was it. And it was quickly kind of buttoned up. But I remember being told my whole life that if you took your life by suicide, that you were gonna, not be in God's favor. So it was always tied back to religion and whether or not God loved you, which is like the last person someone with mental illness needs. But I just appreciate you bringing that up, because sometimes I feel alone in growing up in this like traditional Orthodox religion background. And so it's nice to hear like that, you're all the way across the world from where I grew up. I grew up in a small island, and yet religion is affecting us in this way, like no matter what part of the world you're from. So I think that's important to highlight, especially in the church community.
Yeah, and even, where we are in the world, but also our age difference.
Generation.
So, yeah, it's still the same issue. Even, I would have thought things would be different today. I mean, there's things that are better today, but that fundamental belief that any type of mental illness is, you choose to deal with it, and you have to have faith in God, that's still, really a hindrance to specifically people of color to getting the treatment that they need. I'm just going to add one more thing that is fascinating about my childhood. So I wrote a suicide letter because I think it was more ideations, but I did write the letter, and my mom found it. And the first question was, what's wrong with you? You have a good life. Why are you saying these things? Why would you write this letter? And I didn't even have the words to share, because it was such an instant, something's wrong, other than let's go see someone to find out what's wrong, or let's talk to your doctor to see, why you've written this. It was only, what's wrong with you? You have a good life. The letter was torn up, and there was no other addressing my mental health from my family.
Oh, that's devastating.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you for sharing that. I know this isn't my podcast, Jade. I feel like your mom and I are taking over.
No, I'm so happy. I'm loving just sitting back and letting you guys talk.
That's so meaningful, though. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. You even wrote that. I feel like even though in the mental health space, people are talking about depression, they're talking about anxiety, but I feel like when self-harm and suicidal ideation is just so taboo, like still, it's just so hidden. And I think it's just so important to be like, no, like thinking about wanting to end your life is something a lot of people do. And I think we need to open up those conversations and not make it so scary.
Yeah. And even when I talk about it within my family now, not so much suicide, but mental illness, me taking medication, seeing a therapist, most of my family members look at me like I have 14 heads.
Right.
I mean, it's not like, oh, good for you. That's your thing. It's almost like, when I say these things, it goes silent. It's completely annoyed, and then the conversation that had been going on just picks right back up.
I feel the same way with my family.
Yeah, I'm loving you guys talking. This is exactly what I wanted. But yes, thank you both for sharing about your childhoods. I know that that can be tough sometimes, but I think it's important to speak about our childhoods with this level of wisdom that we now have is healing in a way, and and then just talking about it out loud helps us kind of see it as it really was. So now moving on a little bit to when you guys started getting the mental health challenges that you were experiencing addressed, what were the things that you were diagnosed with, and when were they first addressed?
I can start with that. So, I always knew, like I said, that I was different. And I think in my early 20s was when I could begin to identify that I needed to get some support, but I didn't get a diagnosis until I was pregnant with Amir, who's my son. He's 25. So when probably midway through the pregnancy is when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And I think hormonally, during the pregnancy and all of those hormonal shifts, that's why I think things got worse, which forced me to, speak with my doctor about how I was feeling. At the time, I was not prescribed any medication because I was pregnant, but we know now that there are definitely medications that can be taken during pregnancy that's safe. So yeah, in my mid-20s, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And then in my probably early 30s, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 and PTSD. PTSD was diagnosed in therapy because of obviously all the trauma that I had experienced as a young child. And then the bipolar 2 was diagnosed because I started to have just sort of this consistent baseline feeling of depression. But then I would have these brief periods of just hypomania, very excited, staying up a couple nights in a row, being extremely productive. But then it would last maybe 3 days, and then I would go back to just sort of having this baseline feeling of depression and not being happy. So, yeah. So in my mid-20s initially, and then started consistent therapy in my early 30s.
Wow. For me, and again, it's so fascinating to me, like generationally, I didn't start learning about my mental health challenges till my 20s. You would think that by the time my childhood came around, like at least there'd be some discussion about it. But no, I was like completely in the dark until I was a senior in college. And it was a spine specialist who actually said I had anxiety. She can't diagnose me because she's a spine specialist, but she was like, I think you have anxiety and this is where you should go. Because I was experiencing debilitating back pain and like pain in my vertebra in my neck and certain parts of my back. But it was always centralized to my my spinal cord, which we know our central nervous system, a ton of nerves are in there, and anxiety connects to that, right? So I was paying attention to those signs, and I went and got tons of testing done, and everything came back negative. And finally, I had a doctor that didn't just say, the test came back negative, you have no problems. She acknowledged that there was a problem, and she said I should probably go, get a therapist. I didn't, because I was too scared to figure out how much that would cost. I didn't have health insurance at the time. I was paying it for everything out of pocket. But it was the very first time I even heard the term anxiety in relation to me. And that was a big deal. I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? What is anxiety? Like, what does it entail? And why is it making my back hurt? Why am I having migraines?
Yeah.
All these physical symptoms that I now know are normal, but just really didn't at the time. And then I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was pregnant with my second child. And I didn't go on any medication, but I was closely monitored by the healthcare team in my second pregnancy. And I'm so grateful for that. And then my daughter was, I think, about 3 months old when I was officially diagnosed with PTSD and major depressive disorder, and, was given an ACEs assessment, which is adverse childhood experiences. It's an assessment to evaluate how much trauma you've been through. And I scored an 8 out of 10. And to this day, that diagnosis of PTSD and depression and that ACEs score really helps me to validate myself when I am gaslighting myself and telling myself that I should be as productive as this person. I should be further along in my career. I should be doing better and all this stuff. And to remind myself of the facts, which is that I have PTSD and depression. I have an ACEs score of an 8 out of 10, and I cannot compare myself to other people. And like, if I had any other disease, right? If I had diabetes, if I had cancer, if I had a physical disability, maybe I didn't have a limb or something, I would probably have a little bit more compassion. Not saying that we don't all struggle with a little bit of self-gaslighting, a little bit of self-invalidation, but it's really easy to discount what we go through. And so, it's really free. I know it's scary to anyone listening to this who's scared to go and get evaluated, but it is liberating when you finally know what's going on, and it can really inform your treatment plan. So since 2019, when I was formally diagnosed, I've been in and out of therapy, mostly in, and I've been on medication, a lot of different kinds of meds, but I'm finally on a medication now after taking an 8-month break that is really helping me survive and thrive in a way I haven't in a while. So that's kind of the spectrum of it. So since 2019, really, is when I started to really get care.
I like that you brought up gaslighting yourself and, being really hard on yourself, but then being able to challenge that with the facts of the disorders that you're living with. I think part of the challenge, one, is society's the stigma about mental illness. If there wasn't a stigma, if it was considered as a biological issues, just like diabetes, heart disease, etc., then you wouldn't have to sort of check yourself and remind yourself, because it'd just be a normal part of how we look at illness, because they're illnesses. So I have to remind myself of those things too. Sometimes I get sort of far down the road in like anxiety or being depressed about something, and then I'll remember, oh yeah, I'm functioning in a different way than most other people. So, evaluating my life with my peers, it doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. We have to have realistic expectations with ourselves. And I honestly feel like when I really go into validating myself and checking in with the facts of what I'm going through, my problem solving gets so much better. It's like you can waste your energy comparing yourself to other people, or you can channel that energy into problem solving for you. And problem solving for me has been way more effective when I just go, okay, these are my challenges. These are my struggles. It comes from a place of self-acceptance. Once you accept these things about yourself, then you're able to work with yourself instead of work against yourself and go, you should be doing this. I feel like the thing that's really pivoted for me in the last 5-6 months has just been like, I have a new level of acceptance of the challenges I have. I'm not in a rush to make them go away, quote unquote. I'm just like in acceptance of where I am at. And I've been way kinder to myself. And I almost feel like that's part of the treatment plan. It's like taking your mental illness seriously, even when the world doesn't.
Yeah.
It's so empowering to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
That is beautiful because I can relate to that of just like, I definitely go through periods of like taking my mental health seriously, and then I'm like, oh, I felt better, so it's probably not as much of an issue anymore. And then a few months later, I'm in this really horrible place. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's a great point. That acceptance of it is hard. I probably in my 20s, my late 20s, and probably up until I was about 40, I would go off and on medications, thinking, just like Jayde mentioned, oh, I'm fine. I don't need that. And then at one point, my physician, not even my psychiatrist, she was like, bipolar is not something that can be cured. You're going to have to be on this medication for the rest of your life. And when she put it like that, that really changed how I manage it. So I don't play around with medication anymore. I stop that. I stay on it because it works. When I'm off of it, my entire life goes into chaos. So that acceptance is crucial.
I thought it was interesting that both of you got at least one of your diagnoses during pregnancy. Because my next question is shifting more into parenting. And I'm wondering how your mental health shifted when you became parents. Obviously, some shifts occurred as you were pregnant as well. So, can you talk about that?
I'll jump in. It shifted because suddenly I was thrown into caring for my babies, which made my own childhood and my experiences and the trauma. It made all of that come to a huge surface where I couldn't really ignore it anymore. So having to nurture and breastfeed and take care of Mia and Jayde, my own childhood was just at the forefront of almost everything I did. So it shifted in that I needed to get consistent support, and I started going to therapy and really started caring for, my inner child, my inner baby, which, even today, there's still pieces of it that sort of pop up about, the child, Kathi. But yeah, it just brought up feelings of basically how the baby, the young child, even the teenager, for me was not addressed or nurtured in the area of my mental health. It made me address the inner baby, but the anxiety also made me sort of like a mama bear times 20. Like I was obsessed with them when they were babies. I was constantly afraid that something would happen to them. If I had to travel, it was so borderline paranoia. Most of the time, it wasn't even enjoyable. I did things like check their breathing at night, well past them being babies. So yeah, it brought up a lot, and I had to shift caring for myself so that I could be present and healthy as a mom, but also shift that paranoia that I had about them so I wouldn't, hinder, their growth and their lives as well.
That's, I can relate. Yeah. I mean, becoming a mother really, it brings everything to the surface. And for me, I think part of it was because I stayed home. I didn't go back to work full time. I worked part time from home instead of at my full time corporate job. And when you're sitting at home alone with your thoughts, with the newborn, without your typical distractions. I mean, I used to be a workaholic. That's how I coped with everything. I just worked myself into the ground. And all of a sudden, I'm working myself into the ground as a new mom, but it's a different kind of work. It's the kind of work that requires your entire being. When you're at your corporate job, you can just use your brain, but when you're a mother, you have to use your brain, your heart, your soul, your literal boobs. Like literally every part of you is being used. And I didn't have the support that I needed. I mean, my husband and I were really doing all of this on our own. We had nobody to call on really. And so it was a lot. And my anxiety got extremely bad, and it was difficult to leave the house. I mean, and even if I did leave the house, it's like it would take all the energy for the day. Done. Nothing left. And I felt lonely and sad. And I'm just like, oh my God, is this what motherhood is? I want to like this, but I don't. And this is so upsetting that no one's told me about this, or there's a lot of moms in the world. And how come I'm just now figuring this out? Where is the community around, And like, I had a lot of friends, but like I was the first one in my friend group to become a mother. And so I feel like because nobody talks about motherhood, you don't realize how much a new mom needs support until you become a mom yourself. And you're like, oh, wow, yeah, I should be better, there for my friends. But yeah, I don't even remember the whole question, but yes, it changed my life. And it really forced me to, you know what, there's this quote that I heard in a book written by a pediatric neuroscientist who studies like the brains of children. And he said the reason why becoming a parent can be so triggering for some people is because you enter back into the parent-child relationship. So I didn't think that becoming a mom was going to be triggering, even though I went through a lot of trauma in my childhood. But there's something about re-entering into that relationship, even though you're the adult this time, it still opens up all those wounds, and you're scared that you're going to mess it up. And you see yourself doing the things that you said you would never do. Like, you're like, oh, I'm never going to do that when and it's not about you being a failure, or you not needing to try harder. When you learn about neuroscience and like how your brain works and how neural pathways are formed and forged, especially in early childhood, you realize that you actually don't have a choice. If you witness certain things as a child and your brain goes, when we have this trigger, this is how we respond.
Right.
It's not something that you can just change because you choose it. You have to practice it. You have to become aware of it. You need therapy to work through it. So I started reading a lot of books as well about trauma, neuroscience, the brain. It was a rough couple of years in the beginning.
Yeah, it is rough. And like you said, those things you say you would never do that your parents did. So I was firmly committed to being, a super nurturing, loving, and caring mom, which I think I did. But I took it to the extreme when, Amir and Jayde were younger, and, I didn't think anyone was good enough to watch them. I always wanted to be there to pick them up, to, just constantly be present. But I was, on the flip side, so paranoid that, like I said, I didn't feel safe that other people would take care of them the way I wanted them to be cared for. And I think, that really impacted their relationship with some family members, particularly their grandparents, who love to take care of, their grandchildren and all of that. And I never really got comfortable with that until they were around 5 or 6 years old. I remember one time, me and Amir and Jay's dad had gone on a trip. This was before Jay was born. Amir was about 7 or 8 months, and we had to go away for 2 days. And he would be staying with both sets of grandparents for one night. And I wrote a 5-page letter on how to take care of them.
Wow.
I'm gonna ask one of the grandparents if they still have it. It was definitely an unhealthy. I mean, usually you might give a little checklist, a couple bullets. Do this, don't that. Feed them at this time. Don't let them do that. But it was 5 pages, and then the last page was a list of it, like added. It was like a summary of everything in the previous 4 pages, and then like do this. Don't do this. Don't start it first. Like, don't kiss him in the mouth. Don't, like be up in his face. Don't give him a pacifier. It's all these things that, they saw the letter. My mom was like, she just threw it. Like, I'm not going to deal with that. And their dad's mom, she took it, and I think she tried to stick to it, which was totally unfair. There's no way anyone could do the things that I had listed. So, yeah, that shift into that parent-child relationship was pretty it was pretty intense for me because I wanted
Protect
to
them.
nurture them and
Yeah.
protect them. Absolutely protect them.
I feel that.
Yep. Yeah, and their grandparents are amazing grandparents, but I think because I put some space between them and their grandparents and everyone else, that it I think impacted probably the level of their relationships with them today.
So, yes, I think that people are going to be able to. I'm just glad that you guys are able to speak about those shifts because I think that there are probably a lot of moms out there who experience the same thing and feel like something's wrong with them.
Yes.
But I, like you were mentioning, Mia, like, I know that once you enter into mamahood, at least what I've heard, friendships kind of dwindle
Yeah.
out, unless you have other mama friends.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we have this platform to hopefully make some moms out there feel less alone.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys about change and the ways in which you have to adjust both your parenting and how you take care of your mental health in periods of change. I know both of you have recently gone through a change in your life. We can start with Mia. I know that recently you did an international move. So I'm wondering, do you have to adjust the ways that you parent and take care of your mental health during these periods of change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and transition is like something that happens all the time. I think when you're a mom, it's like, even if I'm not moving internationally, like my kid gets to a new age or he starts school or, we're always going through periods of change. And I think one of the biggest gifts you can give to yourself is not putting your head in the sand and going, change is coming and it will affect me. Now, what am I going to do about it? Because I've not been good at acknowledging that. I just want to be a strong soldier. I don't know where that metaphor came from, but just that's the visual I have. I'm like, I'm just strong and unaffected, no matter what elements are running by me. But that is not how my body works. So when I first moved and leading up to the move, I was a hot mess express, really, really struggling with my mental health. I had just finished transcranial magnetic stimulation treatment, which is where they use a magnet to zap your prefrontal cortex to try to get rid of your depression. That's my way of describing it. And it was ineffective. It did not work. And I was not in therapy and I was not on medication. And I was packing up my whole life that I had built in California over the last 10 years to move to a new country. So when we came over here to Portugal, that's where I live now, after a month of trying to get the lay of the land, I started looking for a psychiatrist here. I started looking for a therapist. I remember reaching out in a Facebook group asking for help, like, hey, has anyone recently moved here and found some mental health care? What was that like for you? Who do you recommend? Crickets. every other post in this Facebook group has like all these comments on how to do this or what are the best neighborhoods, where should you go? And I ask about mental health care and no one has anything to say. And I'm just like, you can't tell me that I'm the only person in this Facebook group with 5,000 members who has anxiety.
Wow.
Like, is this how badly stigmatized? I bet you people, and you know, when you were saying that people look at you like you have 14 heads, that is literally what it's still like. And I'm so used to talking about my mental health out loud now because I've been doing it for 5 years. But man, when I go out in the real world, when I'm not talking on a podcast or a YouTube video, when I go out and I just casually drop, yeah, I almost had a panic attack last Friday. Like, people are like, oh, yeah. You know, they're just like, they don't know what to do. People just don't know how to handle even hearing about mental health issues. So anyway, I was able to really easily find a psychiatrist and a therapist. And I'm on medication now since April or May. And that's how I've been handling the transition. And I remember talking to my doctor about it and saying like, oh, you know, I'm scared to go back on medication. Like, I just had a lot of bad experiences with medication last year. But I was just telling her what I was going through. And she was just like, don't hesitate to get medication, even if it's just temporary, to help you through this transition. Like, I really needed someone outside of me again, because I was like, I don't know, I'm not doing well. I'm not sleeping well. I don't feel good. And she was like, you're moving countries. She's like, this is a big change. Your body is going to respond to it. You're going to struggle with it. And you don't need to white knuckle your way through it. You don't need to hold on tight as you like, you know, try to land somewhere. And hearing those words from a professional was really valuable to me at that time. Because sometimes you get so deep in your anxiety, you can't even cognitively deduce that it's normal to go through this. And that's where I was, unfortunately. I was so in it. And unfortunately, like, my husband also was feeling anxious. Like, we both were anxious. And that's the challenge, right? Like, I think we expect our partners to be able to always be able to support us in those ways. And he just couldn't because he was dealing with his own stuff. And so I'm, you know, glad I opened up to somebody else, a third party outside of my relationship, to go, here's what's going on. And she was like, you don't need to suffer through this transition. There is help. Go get help. And so that empowered me to get on medication and start therapy again.
Yeah, that's great. Sometimes it's like therapy doesn't necessarily, it's not really like this magical thing, but there are little nuggets that you get, that a question or a comment from a therapist that really helps to shift your thinking. And, you know, I always used to consider myself like the master of dealing with change because I had so much of it growing up. My mom had me as a teenager. I went to 5 different elementary schools by the time I was in 3rd grade. I had to live really independently, getting myself ready for school, you know, meeting new people at all of these different schools. So, and we moved a lot. So, you know, I always felt like, oh, I can handle change. I did that. But what I realized after having the kids is that I wasn't handling change. I was being that, in air quotes, soldier that you mentioned, just sort of plowing through. So, you know, during my 30s, as the kids were getting into activities and doing different things, I realized through therapy that I really was not managing change well. I was mostly stuffing it and not addressing it. So once I was able to, you know, find a good therapist that I connected with, because we know you don't always connect with a therapist. And sometimes when the therapist-client relationship changes, another area of change, you have to find another therapist that'll fit your needs for that period of time. So yeah, just learning and learning about change, that the way I had been managing it was not healthy or effective, and that it's okay to seek help during those periods of change.
You both mentioned just how it's okay to really get some extra support during periods of change, and I think that that's really important to mention just for everyone, because it can feel like you're supposed to do it alone, but you don't have to. And so, Mom, I wanted to ask you a question going further into change. I know that now you have 2 adult children. And I'm wondering how managing your mental health, if it's different now that you have adult children.
Wow, that's a deep question. So the whole empty nest concept, I'd heard about it, I knew what it was, but I didn't think it would affect me the way it did. So I became an empty nester in 2019. Jayde moved to the West Coast. My son graduated college and moved to New York. So suddenly there I was with the empty nest. And I would say for the first year and a half, all my anxieties came back. Depression was massive, because I had to not just deal with my mental health, but deal with that big change of not being hands-on as a mom anymore, accepting the change in each of them being, 100% independent, which is how I raised them to be. I raised, they were raised to leave the nest and explore the world and try different things. So although I knew those things were good, it was just hard accepting, this new aspect of motherhood that isn't necessarily hands-on or every day. So that impacted my mental health with shifting from general anxiety to being anxious with how they're faring so far away from me. Like if something happened to Jayde, how could I get out there really quickly to help? If something happened to Amir, how could I get there and help? And I remember, I think it was COVID, or it might have been during George Floyd, but I created this sort of phone tree, 800 number, how to get in touch with everyone, emergency list. Jayde, I don't know if you remember this, but I created this document where if some sort of disaster happened, we can reach each other on, this online platform, or you can call this number to check in and make sure everyone is okay. And that's sort of how my anxiety showed up in one way, like being paranoid. There's some sort of disaster, we'll never be connected. So I tried to create this little emergency list on how we could stay connected. So yeah, things flared up again. And when I became an empty nester, I wasn't in therapy. I was between therapists. So when I found the right one, it just made a difference in helping me to process through my feelings with my mental health, but also just the reality of becoming an empty nester. Those feelings are valid, and things are going to shift for you emotionally and mentally when your children leave the nest. So I'm pretty much good with it, but there are some things that, I still worry about, like their safety and the things that they do that I have no control over. But it's not at that paranoid level. I can manage how my mental health shows up in that way. So Mia, it's going to happen at some point. And I would just a suggestion to throw out there, sometimes when you're a mom, you don't necessarily lose yourself. You just sort of put, or at least for me, I put myself a little stuff that I wanted like on a shelf over here. So my focus was primarily always on the kids. So now it's like, what are the things that I'm passionate about now without being attached to being a mom?
Yeah.
So I'm just suggesting don't give up the stuff that you love. Try to weave it into your parenting, so that when that emptiness stage happens, it's not such a hard transition the way I had.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I know it seems like 100 years away.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Quick.
People tell me that all the time. They're like, better watch out. Like, they grow quickly. I'm like, are you kidding me? Every day I'm like, my son lost 2 teeth in 1 month. And it's been emotional for me. I was telling my therapist about it, and I like almost started crying. Like, and my son used to be very confused and concerned when I would get emotional anytime he would have a milestone that excited him. And now we have a term, we call it happy sad. And it's really been really beautiful because he's like, Mom, why are you sad? It's like, well, I'm sad that you're growing up because, you know, you're my baby and you're getting older, but I'm also happy that you're growing up. And so I'm happy and sad. And it's normal to feel that way. It's okay. You know, I'm okay. And so then the other day I asked him, like, what are some things that make you feel happy, sad? And he was like, ice cream. He was like, ice cream just tastes so good. It makes me happy, sad. And I literally can relate though. Like, I'm a foodie. And when I eat certain foods, I'm like, how did God make this? Like, how does this exist? But also he was like, so where we live, there's a lot of seagulls and we have like these big glass doors by each of our bedrooms. And so I noticed in the mornings would like open up his room darkening shades. And I'm like, where's Charlie? What is he doing? He's usually out here in the kitchen, like getting food. And I realized every morning he opens the shades to watch the seagulls fly by. And he said that seeing the seagulls makes him feel happy, sad. And I'm just like, this kid is such a romantic. Like, he's like watching the seagulls at 5 years old, being like, oh, so beautiful, you know, and just a variety of things. Like, I told him, I'll love you no matter what you do, you know? It's like, even when you do something that I don't want you to do, I'll love you no matter what. And he's like, oh, Mom, that makes me happy, sad. So anyway, I could go on, but I don't even know what the question was. What we were talking about. Oh yeah,
So
how
sweet.
old is that? My son, he's 5, but he talks like he's 20 sometimes. I'm just like, you know, I'm like, I see him growing and I'm trying to just enjoy every moment of it and soak it in.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that you gave him that language of happy, sad. That's so important for him to have that and be tapped into what that means at his age. Because boys don't often get that mental health support. Even as adults, you know, we talk about as moms, like not sharing all the information about mental health or how we're feeling. But men, you know, it's exponentially less. So, you know, allowing him to feel emotional and giving him this language, I think is going to be a critical part of his own mental health as he grows.
Thank you so much. I'm trying.
Yeah.
This is so great. I love this conversation. You guys both briefly mentioned self-care. And so as we close out this conversation, I want to ask you guys, what are, like, do you guys have self-care routines or things that you do to stay well mentally and physically on a regular basis as you're juggling parenting and managing your mental health and work and all of the things that come with life?
That's a great question. And I'm really good at telling other people how to have self-care and how to take care of themselves. And I'm always telling, you know, people, be gentle with yourself. It's really hard for me to maintain it. I do well for periods of time. And then, like, if something happens, I sort of put my self-care, you know, to the side. But I think I'm doing better than I have probably in my entire life. But I have to do things like, now I write what I need to do with a Sharpie on my mirror in the bathroom to remind me, okay, you know, sit still and just breathe, or, you know, whatever the things are, do some yoga or sit outside and just be with nature. So I think the most consistent thing I do is either during my lunch break or when I get home, just sit for about 20 minutes and just be, and just, you know, let the day flow through me, let any thoughts that I have. I guess you could call that meditation. But yeah, I just sit and just sort of, you know, let thoughts flow through, let my body rest from like being tense all day. And then during my lunch break, if I'm in the office, I'll go outside and, you know, just stand out there for a moment. And getting my nails done and a pedicure, that's something That's been part of my self-care consistently. That's something that I
love
never
that.
like give up. So yeah, so I would just say, taking care of my fingers and my toes, and just sitting with myself quietly.
I love that. For me, the thing I do most consistently, like I have a lot of different self-care practices that I do on a regular basis. Like I was writing them down earlier to just prep for this interview, and I was like, this is too much to talk about. I would say like there's a domino effect, right? There's some things I like to call cornerstone habits. They're kind of like the foundation. And for me, that's yoga and mindfulness or meditation. So I always do 10 minutes of yoga after breakfast and then 5 minutes of sitting in silence. So I'll just put on a 10-minute yoga YouTube video. And during that, I try to be really present with my body. Like when I'm doing each pose, like where is the tension? Where do I feel tight? How can I breathe even deeper? How can I exhale even longer? I really believe that, you can really make the most of 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be an hour. And in fact, when I used to push myself to be like, no, I need to do 30 minutes of yoga or it doesn't count. That's stressful because I don't have 30 minutes. I'm a mom of 2 young kids. So those 10 minutes every day is so meaningful. And when my sunroof doesn't have a bunch of seagull poop on it, I usually do my yoga up there because the breeze and the sun, the vitamin D first thing in the morning, and also getting that like direct sunlight in my eyes helps me to wake up. But after I finish that 10 minutes, I set a timer for 5 minutes and I just breathe. And usually I notice all the ways that tension and worries come up, and I just kind of allow it to come up and acknowledge that they're there. And I bring that up, and I call that meditation. And I bring that up because I think people think meditation is having a blank mind, and it's actually not. It's about being with your emotions, because all day long we're just doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then whatever's going on is just not being addressed. And I find that mindfulness is like such a cornerstone. It anchors me, and it sets off a positive domino effect for the rest of my day. Because, for instance, during yoga and meditation, I might realize that there's something that's really bothering me in work, and maybe I need to bump that up in priority in my schedule so that once it's done, I'm not tense. Kind of realizing and rearranging priorities comes from those daily 15 minutes of mindfulness every day, right? So it's so simple, and I love it, and I've just been getting better and better at doing that. But yeah, that's what really helps me take care of myself, get my mind right in the morning.
Yeah. Spending time in nature is so therapeutic. Even if it's just like walking outside of your house, right? Like you said, getting some sunshine, getting some vitamin D. And I think we as people who are, who have lived experiences with different types of mental disorders, it's important for us to continue to share care and self-care practices. And, like it can be something as simple as 5 minutes of sitting with yourself, or 1 minute. And, like it can be something as simple as 5 minutes of sitting with yourself, or 1 minute. Because, I think self-care, especially for, I'm going to say women of color, because like, these are the ones that I know, it's like, it looks like a luxury. Like, you shouldn't need to have to do any extra self-care. It's not something that should be addressed because you're a mom, you're a grandmother, you're a CEO at work, you do all these activities with your kids, and we kind of see it as, just a luxury when you should be prioritizing other things.
Right.
And prioritizing ourselves can make us show up so much more authentically to our children.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Self-care, like you're saying, Mom, it sometimes can feel like it has to look like a certain thing. There's so many like self-care rituals online that look really great in theory, but like actually implementing them in your life is harder. And so having you guys say what you do for self-care and just showing that it's very individualized and like doesn't always have to look the same, I think will be really helpful for people to hear. And now, since we're at the end of the episode, I want to give you guys an opportunity to tell people where they can find you and follow you to see what work you're doing as time goes on. So we can start with Mia.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks for having this conversation. I really appreciate it. So if anyone's interested, I am a trauma-informed self-care coach, and I teach classes, and I host a group coaching program and host monthly support group calls, and they're really healing, beautiful community spaces. And you can learn more about that at miahemstad.com. And you can also find me on YouTube if you want to check out my free content. I also post my podcast content there, and that's just easy to find. Just search Mia Hemstad on YouTube, or search my name on any of your places you find your podcasts. You'll probably find the No Longer Last Journey podcast there as well. So those are the places you can find me.
Well, you can't find me in any of those places because I'm not really on social media at this point. But if anyone's interested in contacting me about a breastfeeding book or topics, or how to, get funding for your nonprofit, you can always email me at kb@kathyb.com. That's KATHI.com.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Students of Mind. I want to give another big thank you to Mia and my mom for being returning guests on the show. I thought this was a really cool discussion to have between two moms of different generations. So, if you'd like to follow Mia or my mom, their links will be in the description of the episode. As always, if you'd like to stay up to date with the Students of Mind team, our links are in the description of this episode as well. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something new or resonated with something that you heard today, and I will see you all next season.